Procurement standards. This is modeled on A102 language. So for state, local governments that have been following A102, this will not look very different. But for universities, it does, and nonprofits, it does look a little bit different. Again, you have that states use state policies, other entities use the standards described in the section of the guidance. So the way that the little framework we've used to explain the procurement standards to folks is the procurement bear claw. Get ready, because you're about to see a bear claw. There it is. I wasn't joking. So there are 5 standards methods of procurement. These are micro purchases, small purchases, sealed bids, competitive proposals, and sole source. No matter which method of procurement you're using, there are general standards which apply. One is the entity has to have documented policies in place, the procurement has to be necessary to the award, and we have general standards that I mentioned earlier about the efficient procurement, so shared service agreements, strategic sourcing agreements, thinking about how to structure that procurement most efficiently is encouraged. Full and open competition, depending on the method you're using, there's a degree to which you need to make sure you're using full and open competition, but there's a preference for that throughout. Conflict of interest, again, dating back to the conflict of interest policy, you can't have conflict of interest in your procurements. And depending on the method you're using, documentation of your cost price analysis and ultimate vendor selection. Moving into just a little bit more detail about those methods of procurement. Micro purchase, this is the smallest. This is for procurements under $3,000. And you have small purchases up to $150,000. Now the thing to remember about these thresholds, they were not arbitrarily chosen by the COFAR. These come from the federal acquisition regulations. So they're the exactly the FAR. So these are the exact thresholds you see in federal procurement standards. Here they are for grants as well, for procurements under grants. So micro purchases, no quotations required, and there's an encouragement for equitable distribution. So this means if you generally shop at CVS, every now and then go to Walgreens. That's what it means. Don't just automatically buy your stuff at the same place. Try to shop around. That's what we're talking about at 3,000. But there's no documentation requirement, no cost price analysis. Small purchase up to $150,000 under the simplified acquisition threshold. You do need rate quotations from an acceptable number of sources. Acceptable number is generally understood to be more than 1. So that can include 2. And what that means is you have to at least make an inquiry prior to making a purchase. Maybe you're using the internet, you're searching, you're seeing, okay, suntan lotion is $5.50 at Walmart and $6 at Target. We're going to Walmart today. It could be that simple. You have to do some sort of, hey, I saw 2 options, I saw 3 options, maybe I called a guy, maybe I called one other guy before I pressed purchase. That's that requirement. You don't have to document your cost price analysis, you don't have to document your selection, you just have to generally make that inquiry prior to making a purchase. Sealed bids. This is over $150,000. Your 2 here are sealed bids and competitive proposals. Sealed bids tend to be construction projects. This is where you know what you want. We're building a highway from point A to point B, and price is the major factor. So you're getting sealed bids with different price proposals. Competitive proposals are for more open-ended types of procurements. You're not exactly sure what you want. You have to accomplish this goal. You're looking for innovative proposals for how they're going to do it. You have criteria. You put that in an RFP for how you're going to measure your proposals, and then you get those proposals back and evaluate them. Sole source. There are 4 occasions when you can make a sole source procurement. 1, the item is unique. So let's say it's a scientific experiment, it's a particular type of chemical, it has to match the chemical you used last time, it has to be from the exact same place, it's a really unique chemical, you can sole source it, that's fine. 2, it's a public emergency. There's a huge forest fire, you gotta put the fire out, you gotta help people, you gotta get the money out the door, sole source, that's fine. 3rd, it's authorized by the federal awarding agency or pass-through entity. Anytime the federal awarding agency or pass-through entity tells you it's okay to do a sole source procurement, it's okay. So if you think you might need to, you can get permission. And fourth is there's no competition. There is only one person selling pencils in the entire city of Los Angeles. That's where you're going to buy your pencils. Done. Yeah, question?
I had a question about the sealed bids and competitive proposals. So the state of California has a more restrictive procedure. Our public contract program is we have to go up to public bid at $100,000. So we're going back to your original proposition of governing law. Currently, the UC system is proposing to the state legislature to increase that to 150 to match this. In the meantime, since it's going to take a long time, what's your recommendation? Do you stick with federal or go with state?
So the federal, it's a good question. So the state of California has a more prescriptive threshold at 100,000. The question is, do we stick with the federal or go with the state? The federal requirement is you have to do sealed bids above 150,000. There's nothing that prevents you from doing them at a lower level. You just, if you hit 150,000, then you have to do them. So from the federal perspective, you would get in trouble if you were doing a procurement for 175,000 and you weren't doing it. But you won't get in trouble if you're at 100,000 and you are doing sealed bids. So if the state of California has a more prescriptive requirement, then you will probably be best served following that more prescriptive requirement. The federal government doesn't care if you do or you don't. The federal government is just going to go in and look and make sure that you at least comply with the federal terms and conditions. But the state of California probably cares, so unofficially I would advise you to comply with that, unfortunately. But I think it's actually really admirable that you are making the proposal to actually think about putting the two in line. Again, that's a great example of this is the first year of marriage. We have these new requirements coming out. Let's have the conversation. Let's think about ways that we can harmonize how we're doing this. So that's great.
Can I follow up question?
Sure.
So about the FAR, so if you have a procurement that's split funded between a federal contract and federal grant, and the FAR says that you don't have to competitively bid if you're using a certified small business, which one would govern?
Interesting. So the terms and conditions of the award are always what governs. And so it's hard to sort of talk about a specific situation without really knowing the details of that particular situation. And in this case, you have two different sets of terms and conditions probably that are governing what you do. I would sort of say the more prescriptive one is probably always the safest one. But again, this is a great opportunity to pick up the phone, call, talk to the federal awarding agency of both awards, and see if you can get a more harmonized answer for that particular approach. The one sort of piece of this to always take back is if there's ever a question in a particular circumstance of how to manage an award, it's always a good idea to call the federal awarding agency. Because when it comes time to do your audit, and the auditor is sitting down and saying, hey, why'd you do it this way instead of that way? If it's not particularly clear in the terms and conditions of the award, if you have it in writing from the federal awarding agency, hey, they asked if they could do it this way, it's fine, then you're covered. The auditor won't have any questions, you're good to go. Saying, well, I heard it from Victoria Collin back in March, we were at this talk, probably won't help you. Any other questions before we take a break on any of our stuff that we've heard so far? Yep.
When you talk about the federal agencies coming out with regulations to correspond with this, would that include the preamble or the supplementary information in the beginning, or is there stuff really just supposed to be once the actual regs seem to start?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. In a way, both. The preamble is really just the context for the guidance in 2 CFR 200. It's not policy itself, it just kind of gives you the explanation. Here's what the COFAR was thinking, here's what we considered, we thought about this, we did that. 2 CFR 200 is the guidance, that's what actually governs. And so what federal agencies are doing in their implementing regs is literally that one sentence, we, the Department of Education, implement the OMB guidance at 2 CFR 200. Boom, done. That might be it. In some cases, they have a little bit more they need to say. Either they need an exception or they have additional language based on specific circumstances of that program. So you see some of that language there in some of those agency regs as well. But it varies depending on the agency. And 2 of them, I think, do have specific preamble language. It was published in a joint common interim final rule, so I'll talk more about this at the end, but 28 agencies issued essentially 28 separate rules, but in one document all together in the Federal Register. And so there's one joint preamble that's very short, and then 28 different agencies implementing their rules and kind of making changes to their regulation throughout.